Hey guys, it's Ibrahim Bashata back at it again with another video, and I'm going to be talking about Emily Dickinson. Unfortunately, she's dead, but I found her, and let's get into it. So, Emily Dickinson was raised in a religious family. She lived most of her life surrounded by nobody, isolated from the world, having nothing to express how she feels, but to write poems.
That is correct.
In this individual oral presentation, I will be proving that most of Emily Dickinson's poems uses a running theme of death and morbidity. She creates different viewpoints on how she feels about death to create a sense of religion and immortality. I'll be using these 6 poems. So, Dickinson is a very religious lady. She isn't afraid to die. She expresses immortality as being a problem. Uh, in the first poem, it was not death for I stood up. What did you feel when you wrote this poem?
When I wrote this poem, I remember I was very depressed, sad. I didn't know what to do, so I thought, why not just use a pen and paper to write?
So, you say in the first line of the poem, it was not death for I stood up and all the dead lie down. What did you mean by this line?
This line creates a picture that all the dead lie down, they're resting in peace, but there's me suffering from being alive.
Also, in the second stanza, you used the juxtaposition, I believe, when you said between frost and fire. Is that correct?
Yes, indeed. I use frost and fire. I want to show the reader that I'm in this confused state. I'm questioning myself.
You see, in this poem, Emily Dickinson shows us how talented she is. And in the last stanza, you finish off the poem by a metaphor of a shipwreck. Why a shipwreck?
As I said earlier, I was confused. I used the shipwreck to explain that I want answers. I want to find explanations. I want to find land.
Alright, thank you, Emily Dickinson. We'll go to the second poem. So, the second poem I chose for today is I Felt a Funeral in My Brain. She says, in this metaphor, Emily Dickinson, what do you mean?
This is a metaphor, a simple metaphor, explaining my own mental breakdown with my personal stability.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is where I prove that she uses the theme of morbidity throughout a lot of her poems. This poem identifies Emily Dickinson's life and how she was isolated from everything. Like the past poem, she ends the poem with an explanation of her depression using imagery. What do you mean when you say dropping down? When you said, and I quote, and I dropped down and down. What does that symbolize?
And I drop down and down. I'm dropping down, going deeper into depression.
Also, in the beginning of the poem, you say, I felt a funeral in my brain. What do you mean by a funeral in your brain? Is it an actual funeral?
Oh no, it's not an actual funeral inside my brain. Just thoughts about dying.
So I believe that you are very religious. Very religious that you're not afraid to die. There's actually 2 poems I found that you talk about death and religion and how you love your God. The first poem is, I know that he exists. And the second one is, because I could not stop for death. So let's start talking about the first one, I know that he exists. In the first stanza, I'm pretty sure you're talking about God here when you say, I know that He exists. And you use the wordings, I know, to show no hesitation, right? Yeah.
Correct. There is no doubt in God.
Also, when you say, He has hid His rare life from our gross eyes, you explain that God is too rare to be seen by the immortals, right?
No, of course, you are right.
So you use the words gross and rare to distinguish between mortals and immortals. I chose this poem because at the end of it, Emily Dickinson changes her tone. She starts off the poem knowing that God exists. I know that He exists. But then at the end, you start to question it. Are you doubting the existence of God? Please explain.
Again, Mr. Bashata, all these poems show different viewpoints on how I feel about death. This is, after all, a persona, and I had to show a little doubt about the existence of God because why am I like this? Why am I depressed? Why is everything
Oh,
bad happening to me?
let's go on for the second one that talks about religion. So, because I could not stop for death. You start off saying, because I could not stop for death, He kindly stopped for me. What do you mean when you say He kindly stopped for me? Is He a guy? Or is death something that comes randomly? Please explain.
Here's what you call a personification. I gave death some human traits.
You know what? Let's talk about Ibrahim on the other side. Ibrahim? Ah, yes, Ibrahim. Thank you for inviting me to the show. It was a pleasure listening to what Miss Emily Dickinson had to say. And to continue, it says, the carriage held by just ourselves and immortality. Here, Emily Dickinson is showing how death is basically a bridge between being mortal and the immortal life, and that she can't wait to leave and die. To add on what you said earlier in the past poems, I like your thesis very much. The main part of the show is that she uses a theme of death and morbidity to create different viewpoints on how she feels about death. Well, let me help you and explain. So in this poem, Emily Dickinson shows how she likes to die. She wants to die to meet her God. She's so eager to die, But also, she shares the same feeling in the other poem, I Know That He Exists. In both poems, she wants to die, and she wants the immortal life. However, in the other poems that you explained, I felt a funeral in my brain, or it is not death for I stood up. It's more how she's tired of being alive. And how she's suffering from being mortal, and this gives the reader a sense that she gave up on life. Does she want to commit suicide? Probably, but we don't know. Sorry, Miss Emily Dickinson. But this is the different viewpoints that readers feel when they read Emily Dickinson's poems. It's 2 points. She wants to die to meet God and be in heaven. She wants to die because she's tired of life and the suffering. Thank you, Ibrahim, number one. Back to you in the studio. Hey, Emily Dickinson. Thank you, Ibrahim. And let's talk about the next poem, I Measure Every Grief I Meet by Emily Dickinson. This poem is one of the few poems that really show a good picture of morbidity. The whole poem revolves around one question, which is, and I quote, I wonder if it hurts to live and if they have to try. So, Emily Dickinson here, you're wondering whether it is better to die than having to carry your grief around everywhere and suffering. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
You also say death is but one and comes but once. What do you mean by that?
I'm showing you how good death is. You die once, end of suffering. However, life, you keep suffering.
Also, in the same poem, you talk about your God. You talk about Jesus Christ. And you say, a piercing comfort it affords in passing Calvary. Why are you talking about your Lord Jesus Christ and the place he was crucified? Why do you see this comfort in the place he was crucified?
Because he suffered, but then at the end of the day, he died. And that's what I'm looking for. Death.
Finally, the last poem of the day, we grow accustomed to the dark. This poem is a very dark poem. As it says in the title, you start off with, we grow accustomed to the dark when light is put away. Of course, there's dark when there's no light. But what do you mean? Is this a type of metaphor, or please explain?
Dark refers to the color black. And black is a color that represents depression.
Oh, so you're saying that you say dark because black is a color that represents depression. Here you have it, guys. She is depressed. You also say, when not a moon disclose a sign, or star come out within. Please explain.
I'm very depressed that when there's a positive side of anything, I still see a negative.
Thank you. So, the last two poems I showed you guys, it shows how. So my friend Ibrahim on the other side talked about how there's two main points of how she feels about death and immortality. It is whether is it better to die, to go to heaven and live a happily after life, or she just wants to die because of her suffering. So these last two poems mainly talks about the suffering part and that she doesn't want to live anymore rather than dying.
To see God. Thank you.